Hear that?
Yeah.
Funky intro music, Dom.
Very cool.
Not as cool as you, mate.
I feel better.
Well, good. You can relax now. Have you got a dram?
No, I've got Elvis juice, Brewdog.
Well, that'll do.
Mm.
I used to drink quite a lot of that. That's the grapefruit flavored stuff?
Yeah, it is. And I'm really into citrusy IPAs at the moment. I've got to monitor what I drink, and I've got to be very careful with whiskey because of my health. So my excuse is to say that it's not whiskey; it's just 6%.
Yeah, it's deadly stuff. Anyway, we are live, and we're on time. Well, nearly on time. Welcome to Desert Island Drams, everyone. My name's Eddie from the Whisky Lounge, and I'm your host for this evening again. And I'm delighted to say that I have reconnected with a friend from the industry who I haven't spoken to for some years. We've just our ships keep passing, Dom, isn't that right? And I thought, what better time to get together and rekindle a friendship than over a few tunes and a few drams.
Great.
So welcome, Dom. Dom, it's delightful to have you here. How are you doing, mate?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me on. You're not the only one I haven't spoken to for a long time, and you're quite right. This is weird times and strange things are happening, but it's just great to reconnect with people and have the time. And in many ways, this has sort of been a time for me for reflection and stuff. So it's just all good. So thank you very much for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Really, really is. And knowing that you're a big music lover as well as beverage lover, it seemed to make a lot of sense as well. So it's a timely addition. So we're gonna talk about your song choices and your drams as we go on through. For those of you that haven't tuned in before, I've asked Dom to choose 5 of his favourite whiskies, not necessarily his absolute favourite whiskies. And similarly for the music, these are songs that he's chosen for the now. But I think you'd be happy enough with any of the combinations on his desert island. So yeah, we'll get right to that. Shall we cover a question first, or should we get onto your first dram? What do you think?
Entirely up to you. I'm happy to do anything.
Well, I'll tell you what, why don't you, obviously not everyone, well, everyone should know you. That's my opinion. That of many others. But just in case people don't know who you are and what you do, why don't you just quickly take us through who you are and what you do and how you got to where you are? Okay.
So I grew up in Leicester. There are signposts throughout whatever I do from my past, but I grew up in Leicester, so I have an affinity there. I went to university in Durham, and then I got a job at the Sheffield Star in the 80s as a news reporter. And I did that for a few years and then emigrated to New Zealand. Spent some years in New Zealand, got citizenship there, and then came back into a really bad recession in the early 90s. And the only job I could get was really I'd been a music journalist in New Zealand. I actually ran the Sheffield Star's music pages and then went over there as a music journalist. So I'd done music journalism. And when I came back, I actually did my last interview on my 30th birthday, 1991, with Mick Hucknall. And it was from Simply Red, if people aren't aware who he is, who was huge at the time, but it was a round table interview, and I was at my depth. I'd come back to London, I was at my depth, and I couldn't get a job anyway. Anyway, I eventually got a job writing about drinks and trade press for trade titles. And what trade titles do is basically they send a copy to every pub for free, and they sell advertising to the companies who want to sell products to the pubs. And I did that for a number of years. Met my wife, was commuting from Norfolk, where she was based, to London, where I was based. And then I got a phone call from March and Miller, or I got contacted by March and Miller Whisky magazine. and he said that my name had come up and would I be interested in talking about editing Whisky magazine, and I knew nothing about whiskey at all. So I did that and came up, my wife, Whisky magazine is based in Norwich, which is where we're based. So it's like I was able to go home at night, which after years of acting like a bachelor. Anyway, my consulting editors, would you believe, were one Michael Jackson and one Dave Broom. So if you want to start a job and know nothing, and you want a couple of teachers, you couldn't have done, I know obviously not now, but you couldn't have done better than that. And then suddenly I discovered this industry where everybody thought I was important because I was coming to talk to them. Sorry, that's my wife's got to think about clocks, and we've got lots of them, and they all go off at different times. Sorry about that. So you go and see a distillery, and they just welcome you with open arms, and they're so humble and so grateful that you wanted to talk to them. You think, but you're the man with all the talent. And I've always seen myself as a little bit like one of those little fish that feeds on the back of a great white shark. And the distillers and the industry of the great white shark, we're the kind of feeding on the back of them and getting carried along with the really important people. But we would it was just an amazing time. And as you well know, and I was listening to Colin last week, that period from 19, so I would have come to Whisky about 2002, 2003. And in that period from 2002 to now, the whole thing has just gone through the roof. And I've just been very fortunate, and I've just had people all over the world who've welcomed me. And when I went freelance, I decided to specialize in New World Whisky, what I call New World Whisky. And this is very early. We'll come to this later when we start talking about some of my drums. But I started thinking, if I get a Ryanair flight or an EasyJet flight to Spain, they put me up in a hotel, take me out for dinner, show me the distillery, and I sell it 3 times in the UK. That's good living. And it meant I made friends with a lot of distillers. And so that's really what I've done the last few years. I've specialized in world whiskey. I'm very, very fortunate. I'm not the best whiskey writer. I'm not the best taster, but I'm populist. You know, there was another whiskey writer once described me as the Liam Gallagher of whiskey. And it was meant to be an insult, but I took it as a huge compliment. Because I see myself as being able to, you know, there's nothing original about Liam Gallagher, or me. But it's
you are. I
mean, you are trying to get the zeitgeist, if you like. So that's it. Yes. That's where I came. I've just been incredibly fortunate. I've had great people around me.
Well, that always helps, doesn't it? But I mean, you are a prolific writer. I mean, how many books are you on to now? 16. 16. I mean, that's pretty good going. That's almost one a year since 2002, isn't it?
Yeah, but it doesn't work like that, does it? Because I've I talk about a reclusive period, and there's reasons for that for health purposes, etc. But I actually had 5 books in 3 years, and if you're writing 40,000 words on 2 totally different whiskey-related subjects, you know, and the irony was that with one of the publishers, these are big publishers, this is Dahl and Kindersley, and but my editor, one of them, left and was replaced by the editor that I was already working for on the other. So I'd say to him, I'm sorry I'm going to be a bit late with my copy. I've got some things to do. Then I'd pick up the phone to him 2 days later and talk to him about the other project. And it was like, there was nowhere to hide when you're in that situation. That did nearly kill me. That really did nearly kill me. But you know, I mean, it's like buses. You just, you know, they come along, you take what you get. And if 2 come along at the same time, that's it. You're not going to turn it down. And none of us have the luxury. I certainly haven't got the luxury of turning any work down. So, you know. Absolutely.
Right. Well, I'm going to talk about your first dram, if you're up for that.
Yeah.
So I've thrown up my little Desert Island Drams presentation here and do the big reveal in a minute. Hopefully no one saw it as it went up as a slideshow. So tell us about your first dram, Dom.
Yeah, so just so I could talk very quickly about the whole, what I've tried to do tonight is try and do something that's not really obvious. Like, so there are not any really rare and unobtainable bottlings in the selection. And at the same time, I haven't gone mainstream populist either. I've tried to do something a bit different. But this first one is an absolute favourite of mine. It would be two of the whiskies tonight are in my top three of all time. And this one is there because I have so many good memories, both the distillery, the way I was introduced to the distillery. The age of this whiskey is just, it's at its perfection. And I've chosen Talisker 18-year-old. And the story I'll tell you quickly about Talisker 18-year-old is my daughter's 14, but when she was really young, I used to tell her that Father Christmas started traveling from New Zealand all the way up to the Northern Hemisphere, and he had to get sherries and mince pies everywhere he went. So by the time he got here, he was fed up with sherries and mince pies. You gave him a good whiskey. So I'm going to put a good whiskey out for him, I tell her, and I'm going to get it from, it's going to be Talisker 18. So for several years, I gave Father Christmas a Talisker 18. And then one year, there was a charity thing where you could send a question to Father Christmas. And my daughter said, well, let's ask him if he really likes Talisker 18. I thought, here we go. Now I've got caught. And the answer came back from Father Christmas. Yes, he said, by the time I've got that far, I'm ready for a good whiskey. But I take the Talisker home with me because I don't drink and drive. And I became an absolute hero for my daughter. That didn't last that many years, but you know. So anyway, I've got huge fondness. What I like about it is because the extra years over the 10-year-old, the 10-year-old's great, but to me, it's just a little bit two-dimensional. It's a bit like what I've described it as an electrical storm. You know, there's not a lot of moisture. There's a lot of activity, a lot of pepper and spice and things going on, but it's a dry run, if you like. At 18, all of the depth of the cask has come into there, and you've still got all the spice, it's stayed there. All those great pepper notes are there, but you've got this beautiful, luxurious three-dimensional whiskey. The other one I love from Talisker is the 5750 or whatever it's called. That's basically tastes like a cask strength Islay whiskey. I love Skye. I don't get there enough. It's too remote to get there regularly, but that's why I've chosen it. It's just an absolute favourite of mine.
Yeah. I think I'm with you on this for sure. I think Talisker. I haven't tried a bad Talisker. You know, that's the hallmark of a great distillery. I mean, most distilleries produce good stuff, but Talisker, among others, produces, you know, outstanding stuff on a regular basis. And the 18-year-old is just a really good balance of you know, a little bit more maturity matched with the fieriness that you associate with it. And tell us about the first track that you've chosen to pair with this dram, Dom.
Yeah, I don't want to get heavy tonight, but I would say that we've all, you know, I noticed Colin Dunn last week spoke about Tom Petty passing away. This coronavirus has been horrific. And of all the things I'll remember from it is the death of the bass guitarist of Fountains of Wayne. I don't know if you know Fountains of Wayne, but Adam, his name is, I never can remember, his name's Adam Schlesinger, and he died of coronavirus younger than me. And this band, Fountains of Wayne, I go back, a lot of the music I picked, because why I picked my music tonight is not for individual songs, but for bands that I've associated over a long period of time, or acts I've associated, who produced 5 or 6 or 7 albums. I could take every single track to a desert island. And this is Fountains of Wayne for me. They are a bubblegum pop band. They have the lyrical dexterity of REM. They write fantastic college music. They are all uplifting, and I've had a difficult 67 years, so I've needed go-to music, and Fountains of Wayne are mine. I'm just going to mention one thing. The track before the track I've picked, so I can just find the note I've made of it, is called Hackensack, right? And Hackensack is a tiny town in New Jersey. And if you look up on the website, the best that they can say about it is, our downtown bus station provides access to virtually everywhere. So a reason to go to it is to leave on a bus to anywhere else. They wrote a song about that place. I just think, you know, when you listen, I'm also really fortunate to have seen them. They made one, I think they've probably only played one UK concert in the last 15, 20 years, and I went to it in London. Trouble is, I was so excited about it, I drank too much and By the time I got there, I went on my own because nobody else would tolerate this sort of thing. Anyway, Valentine Wayne and my go-to Get Happy. This album is called Interstate Plates or something similar. It's got the famous Stacey's Mum on it, which is basically a song about a bloke who's telling his girlfriend he doesn't fancy her. It's his mum he fancies. Her mum he fancies. And Stacey's mum has got it going on. And it was a big hit. He before he died, he won 3 or 4 Grammys. He's a seriously talented lyricist and writer. And that's why I picked them.
Great stuff. Okay, well, we'll listen to that in a second. Can I just, this is extremely unprofessional of me, Dom. Can I just check the timing that you wanted for this one? Because I thought...
Yeah, of course you can. I think we cut in, if we can cut in at 2 minutes 40.
Okay. I think I heard 3 minutes 40, and that's nearly the end of the song.
Yeah, they don't write long songs.
Okay, well, let's hear our first song of the evening, Fountains of Wayne and No Better Place.
Maybe the whiskey talking, but the whiskey says I miss you every day. My taxi's going on at party, parked me in the corner in the ocean. Sip my drink and stare out into space. You're leaving New York.
I think that's all we're allowed until we're switched off. So
I know.
It's nice. It's a nice sound. Very clean.
Yeah, and it is very collegey. And the thing is that they're in their 50s, but when they started out, they were in their early 20s, and it's all a little bit young and fun. But when you listen to the lyrics, there's a lot going on, and they mention whiskey a lot as well.
Well, that's always a bonus.
Yeah. That's why I picked that particular section of that song, because it talks about the whiskey talking. But actually, they a lot of their songs have drinking in. Yeah,
well, that's good. A good start, both whiskey-wise and tune-wise. Thanks, man. Okay, so we're just going to move on to the next question, which I know you're not the only one to have struggled with this, and I might have to change it, but hey. But you know, through our whiskey drinking careers, we meet all sorts of people, do lots of tastings, and meet lots of interesting people, and sometimes hear things that make us go, really? And I know that you struggled a little bit with this, but I think you've come up with a cracker. So the question is, what's your favorite whiskey myth? And obviously this ties in quite nicely with the second track and Dram, I believe.
Yeah, so I did struggle with this, but I came up with a story that I was told personally, which is probably not true. You never know. It was told to me by Bill Samuels Jr. And Bill Samuels Jr. Is part of the Samuels dynasty in America, in Kentucky. Their famous brand at the moment is Maker's Mark. And his father invented Maker's Mark. If you look on the label of a Maker's Mark bottle, there's a Latin number, and it's the wrong way round. And apparently his father's, that's a sexist thing to say. His mother argued with his father that he shouldn't do what every other distiller did and just put the name on the bottle and big Mac shows looking bottle. It should be, because they were using a very wheated recipe, they took their recipes from the Weller stable, and he went along Whiskey Row, his father did, Bill Samuels Sr., went along Whiskey Row and got recipe ideas from some of the greats back in the 40s, and well, after the war, 50s. And he came up with the Maker's Mark recipe, and his wife said, look, don't just market, do it something, why not do it like you would if you'd made a silver jewelry and you put your Maker's Mark on it, your stamp. And they argued and argued and argued. And at the very end, he decided to put this number on it. And he's dyslexic, so the number's back to front, but his wife didn't have the heart to tell him. Anyway, roll forward the years. I went to stay with Bill Samuels Jr. To celebrate the 50th anniversary of Maker's Mark. And that's a story in its own right. If I was writing a book, it's a chapter. Just incredible trip. But the story I'm going to tell you is this: that one evening I was standing by on the wooden veranda with a maker's mark, a large maker's mark, and the swimming pool was all lit up blue with underlighting. You know that blue-green thing you get from a swimming pool. And
Lovely.
ahead was the valley dipping down into the Ohio Valley, down to the Ohio River. And the Ohio River is the front line for slaves. That's where, if you could cross that, you were safe. So any black slave who escaped, they had to get across the Ohio River. That was sort of the boundary between north and south. And it remains so. And down there was dark and foreboding. And then ahead of me was chocolate orange sky. I mean, it's just amazing sky. And suddenly this voice is in my ear, and it's Bill Samuels. And I've described Bill Samuels as like a badly tuned analog radio playing your favourite song. He tunes in and he's got these amazing things to say, and then he just loses interest because he's dyslexic. And that's where his genius comes from. Anyway, he told me this story. He told me that back at the Civil War, when the Civil War started, Kentucky was neutral. But a lot of gangs, people like the Kentucky Headhunters, Quantrill Rangers, I think I'm called, but the Quantrill gang, they would go across the Ohio and burn and rape and pillage. I mean, it's really violent, really nasty, very intolerant. Mm-hmm. But it was to demoralize the northern troops on the other side. What happened was Kentucky was eventually the Confederacy moved into Kentucky, so the Unionists moved into Kentucky and took it back. But two of the members of the Quantrill gang, who were horrific, if you look them up, they're pretty horrific, were Frank and Jesse James. And Bill Samuels was telling this story. He tells you how they used to go along that coast. When the war came to the end, they formed the James gang and continued to operate along that border, and mainly in Missouri and further down. But there is evidence, and I've actually checked it at museums in Kentucky, that they traveled to Kentucky at times, and there's rumors the bullet holes in Bardstown jail were from Jesse James's gun. And Bill Samuels has his gun on the wall in his house. Okay, one of his guns. Wow. He also has the most amazing letter from Abraham Lincoln replying to somebody who said, "You should stand as a politician." And Abraham Lincoln says, "It's very kind of you, but I don't think I've got what it takes to be a politician, and I don't think it's a good idea." And he's got it framed on us all. This is pretty serious history.
Amazing.
Anyway, according to Bill Samuels, the James brothers were obviously being hunted by everybody. So the word went out that they could have an amnesty. But the whole time they've been living on Samuel's property. And one of his ancestors had been pretty much hiding them. And when they were given this amnesty, that they'd never committed crime again and they gave up their guns and that, he said they agreed and married two daughters of the Samuels family. And he reckons the James brothers both married into the Samuels family. And his last words to me in that story when he told me was, "You just can't pick your relatives." And I don't know if that's a myth. I don't know if that's a true story, but it's a bloody great story, and I'm telling it whenever I can. So
that's lovely. It's lovely. Right. Okay. So, kind of, as I mentioned, it kind of moves quite nicely into your next choice, dram and song. So, why don't you tell us about those?
Okay, so very quickly, I chosen Maker's Mark 46. Typical Bill Samuels, this. 46 doesn't relate to its ABV. Obviously, in America, it would be 92 anyway, because they use proof. But it relates to the number. So when you toast or char the inside of a barrel, the yolk on the inside of the barrel, you can do various combinations. You can have a char up to 8, which is the crocodile, the Ardbeg, crocodile. That's an 8 char. You can have a 1 char, which is much less. Toasting is when you heat the wood rather than burn the wood. And if you take combinations of that, what they did with this whiskey, they basically made it the same way. The thing about Maker's Mark is, when you go to the distillery, they'll show you it. They'll show they can only give it to you at 46%. Because they'll show you a 44% version or a 48% version and say it just doesn't work, which isn't it great when we live in an age of brand extension. So this is the way around it. So what they do is they make the standard Maker's Mark, and then they take it, they dump the whole cask, and they replace some staves with French oak that's been charred and toasted to what is called number 46. So it might be, I don't know, a 6 char, 8 toast. I don't know. But do the maths. Somewhere there is a 46. And they put these staves in, they put the whiskey back in, and they leave it for another few weeks. And it takes on a much oakier, spicier, less cloying and sweet flavour. I love bourbon. I could have picked any number of bourbons tonight, any number. But this one is very affordable if it's available, because it's not in every territory. It's been out for about 10 years, but I don't know if it's reached the European market yet. I just takes away that over sweet thing. I haven't got a sweet palate, I didn't have a sweet palate. So the added toastiness and the added spiciness makes this an ideal, perfect bourbon whiskey for me. Yeah,
well, as regular viewers will note, I've become quite fond of my American whiskies too of late. I do like an old-fashioned, Dom. I love old-fashions, and I think when things allow, I'll make you an old-fashioned one day. I'm sure it's not.
That'd be great. I'd like that very much. That's a date.
Yeah, but I tell you what I will do in the meantime is I'm just looking up to see whether, so a shop that will, online shop that will remain nameless, carries Maker's 46.
Okay.
A well-known shop that might end with exchange.com.
I'm due to buy some more drinking whiskey, so thanks for that.
Yeah, it's not too pricey either. So anyway, notwithstanding that, so tell us about the track that you've paired with the Maker's 46.
Yeah, okay, so I listen to quite a lot of Americana. Again, I've got to pick my times, but this particular artist, I started listening to her a few years ago. I don't do it so much now, but I used to do at the end of the year charts with top 10, and the top 5 I'd write a little review, and this particular artist was number 3, and I wrote a little review, and I put it on Twitter, and I got a like from her.
Oh wow!
And it started a internet friendship, and I've met her now 2 or 3 times. She's just a remarkable entertainer, just a remarkable songwriter. She's written for so many stars. When I was watching one of these at-home concerts the other day, so she had to ask people to show Bryan Adams how to connect with her, because she's written for Bryan Adams. Anyway, her name's Gretchen Peters. And Gretchen Peters, I met her a couple of times. Her husband, who's known on line as Barely Washed, but Barry Walsh is her husband, who plays keyboards and does harmonies with her. And they are the most amazing artists. Their last 4 albums have all been good. I'm going to rush through this. The song I picked is not from her new album. She had a new album out this week, or last week, and it's a tribute album, really. It's a selection of songs of Mickey Newbury. And Mickey Newbury is another great national singer-songwriter who wrote for any number of people. I knew him best for American Trilogy, which Elvis used to do, because I'm a huge Elvis fan. And that American Trilogy, that arrangement, etc., was the Mickey Newbury thing. And Martin Miller, about 7 years ago, introduced me to Mickey Newbury, so I'm aware of him. Her new album is just a selection of Mickey Newbury songs, and you'd be surprised how much of it you know. Anyway, right. I haven't done that because I love her poetry. I'm quickly going to read a lyric from a song that I'm not playing, just to give you an idea of what she does. I meet them in the truck stops. I meet them in the bars. I meet them in the parking lots, and I slip into their cars. They come and put their money down. They come and place their bets. I swallow their indifference, and I choke on my regrets. Whoa. And that's about a truck. It's called Truck Stop Angel. It's about a 15-year-old prostitute in the parking lots in America. Her last album before this one was called Dancing with Beasts. And every song is really a female perspective. One's about growing old and losing your looks and how hard that is for a woman. And others about that one I just said about, there's what about mental health? And it sounds really, really hard work, but she's such a beautiful songwriter. And the song I've picked is called Wichita. And it's on a light subject about child rape, incestuous child rape, no less. But she is, I'm so proud to know her. I should have been seeing her tonight. She was due to be playing in London tonight. And I email her regularly, and I've emailed her to hope she's tuning into this, because I've been watching her and Barry do concerts from their home, and they've been absolutely phenomenal. And that's one of the great things that's come out of lockdown, the way we can approach our artists now. But anyway, Gretchen, if you are listening to this, love you so much. And this is Wichita.
Right, well, let's play it.
Alive. She leaves the TV on. You bring some groceries by. Take anything you want. You took it from my mama. Now you're taking it from me. But you touch my little sister. Listen, then you're gonna see.
There we go. So that's Wichita by Gretchen Peters. Thanks, Dom. That's really nice. I love that bit of national slide going on in the background there as well.
Yeah, and her songs aren't all, it's all not all misery, etc. But she has a way with words. I just think she's on a 5-album run, and I recommend anything that you'll find online. Anything, phenomenal. Very, very sad that I'm not singing tonight, but happy I'm with you.
Well, yeah, I'm sure that you'd rather be with Gretchen, and I'm sure you will be again.
Yeah.
It's great. I mean, that's part of the reason I enjoy doing this, is that I get introduced to artists that perhaps I've heard of but never really taken the time to listen to. So, but even just that 30-second segment gives me a good platform to build on. Good stuff. Right. Now, trying to find a cursor. There we go. We're back again. How are you feeling, Dom? You enjoying it?
I'm enjoying myself, thank you. Yes, good. Are you?
Good. Yeah, it's great. It's great. It's good to see you. I haven't seen you for so long. Okay, so we're just going to move into the third question of the evening, which is, obviously all of us are working differently, living differently at the moment out of necessity. We've all been suddenly forced into this Groundhog Day, and and we're all coping differently, all doing different things. And I'm just curious to get a picture of how things are different for you, and perhaps how things are going to be different for you going forward. Certainly from a writing and consulting and everything that you do point of view, and also just life in general.
Yeah, it's funny because I can't really take I can't really call out the sympathy vote, because I don't think it's a secret. I kind of disappeared a while ago. Really, I've been I make my living pretty much on the world stage. I go up to the Alpine region quite a lot. I edit or meant to be editing an Irish magazine. At this point, if I could, no, I'll get to that when we get to the Irish whiskey I've got. I meant to be editing an Irish whiskey magazine. I made the mistake of taking over a magazine notorious for not paying people, and still owes me a small fortune. And so I had it pretty tough. And now I get a government grant as a self-employed person. And I'm sitting exactly where I've sat every day for the last 6 or 7 years, writing. And I've talked through the internet and online to Australia and to the Far East and to my American thing. So in a sense, this is how I've lived my life anyway. And I feel really sorry firstly for anybody under 25 who has all this energy and enthusiasm to live their lives and can't. And I feel very, very sorry for anyone who is very gregarious. And my brother he's a massively sociable beast, and it's hard for him because he's not allowed to do any of that. Whereas my life, in some ways, we're reconnected. I lost a lot of self-confidence, and in a sense, I've seen this as year zero. And I thought, well, how can I make this work? What I do is I put in 1 or 2 calls a day, either to family or friends or to somebody in the industry, just to keep in touch. So in some ways, I don't think it's changed. What I do think is great is this. I think that communicating and bringing in music and actually making it available, the idea that somebody may sooner or later, rather than fly to Australia first class as a global brand ambassador and go to 4 events with 20 people, he can take them around his distillery virtually and do an online event with all the local ambassadors, bringing in. So I used to joke about it with rock concerts, that if it wasn't for the fact we like the physical contact with each other, we're not a million miles. I went to see Elvis Presley, He was on a screen, and there was a band on stage at Wembley, of all places. I mean, it's sold out. And there's this band playing, and they've got put the film in. And how many times do you go to an O2 gig and end up watching it on the screen because, the venue's so big? And you think, do I ever want to go back to 75 quid into the O2 at £5 for a fizzy lager, all the travel difficulties, in my case, a hotel? Am I going to do that, or am I going to go and watch Gretchen Peters and Richie Blackmore and his wife playing stuff in their living room? Yeah, I although I really desperately, myself and Paul from Speyside Distillery have got tickets to see Red Cross in Glasgow in, I think it's October. I got 2 tickets, 12 quid each. I hope that happens, but it might be too soon. A sweaty concert in a very small Buchanan Street venue, not sure. So in some ways, I kind of done okay compared to a lot of people. And in some ways, other people are I'm finding it easier to deal with people because they understand the way it works. It just does.
It's tricky because obviously, all those venues that we talk about, and not going to gigs or not going to sporting events and watching it on TV or on the computer or whatever, it sounds well and good, and it is well and good. I mean, myself, I'm a bit of a cricket fan, or have been through the years, but I would generally rather watch it on TV because the view is much better anyway. Even though I love going to the cricket occasionally because it's a good day out and you just drink and eat all day and natter with your mates. That's all it is. But on the flip side of that, I think about all of the people associated with those venues, all the employment that they bring in, and you've got it's a real balance, isn't it? Because if we no longer do those things, then those people are no longer required, and it becomes, there's got to be a balance. I totally agree with you when it comes to the brand ambassador flying business or first out to Australia and doing 4 tastings for 20 people. That kind of thing for me it's got to stop. It's just lunacy. I think that there are plenty of good people all around the world who want to work in the industry, want to work in whatever industry it might be, who can be utilised and switched on. It doesn't have to be someone in a shiny suit from London or wherever. So I'm down with you on that.
I would just say to that, I totally agree with you, Eddie. Actually, I bought, they say support local music, etc. I'm going to mention 2 rock bands that I'm not playing tonight, but I bought their T-shirts just to support them. But it's going to take a lot of T-shirts to say those acts who can't tour. People like Gretchen Peters can't afford to live their lives, without being able to tour. But I'm mentioning 2 bands, Blackwater Conspiracy and Those Damn Crows. Great. They've locked me through this lockdown. They're great. They've both got 2 albums, and there's not a bad track on any of them. But what I would say is, I'm with you. I desperately miss the football, as you can imagine. I'm a huge Leicester fan, season ticket holder. And we're playing Chelsea in the quarterfinal 1 week back. After the first week of football, there's a quarterfinals of the FA Cup. And can you imagine, Leicester have never won the FA Cup. Can you imagine we get to the FA Cup and it's played in an empty Wembley? It's bizarre. And why Wembley? Because you don't need a big venue. You could play at a local park, really. And I also, and I totally agree with you about cricket. We've done for 15 years now. We've done 2 days of a test match normally at Trent Bridge. But if we can't do Trent Bridge around July, then we do Edgbaston or Old Trafford. And there's 15 of us. We're Leicester fans. We never see each other. And we do exactly that. 2 days. Absolutely.
Great.
And I really missed, and we will replace it. But maybe that's where it's going to come back to. Maybe it's going to be more going to Gretchen Peters and not seeing so much of, some stadium rock band, Muse or somebody, Muse. I love big shows. I had tickets for Rammstein, who have got the biggest rock show in the world. He's a trained pyrotechnic, and they take over football stadiums and basically set them on fire. And I'm not gonna. I've already said I'm selling my ticket, even though it's been reorganised for next year. So anyway, I'm rambling. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. You caught yourself on. Well done. We're gonna move on to your third tune, because I think we're running a little bit behind, but we can catch up. That's all right. And we're having a good time. That's the main thing.
I'll do through this quickly. Are we in New Zealand now?
Well, just hold on a second. I've just got we've got Ian Logan, good old Ian Logan from the Glenlivet, watching at the minute, and he's got a couple of things to say. One of which is he wants me to know that he does not have a shiny suit. Ian, you're way beyond a global ambassador. I wasn't talking about you. And the other thing he says to you, Ian says, you have a huge amount of character and strength, Dom, which I thought was lovely.
I tell you what, there are very, very few people who I love in the industry more than Ian. Ian, I'm really glad you're watching this. Can't wait to see you again, mate. It's funny because Ian and I came to become friends in a quite strange way. It's not worth talking about here, but he's one of my absolute favourite people in the industry, without that. Ian, can't wait to catch up and for you to give me some cheeky whiskies from the Shivers Brothers portfolio. It'd be great.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, maybe I'll get Ian on if he's up for it.
Yeah.
I think he'd be good fun.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So we're going to your third whiskey, Dom. Tell us about.
Are we in New Zealand now? Because.
I can't tell without putting it on the screen. I'm going to have to just.
I'll tell you what, because I think we jumped one. Oh. I think we did Maker's Mark third, but we didn't do the second. Yeah, that's fine. That's okay. We're in New Zealand. Yeah, we're there. Okay, very, very quickly. I don't think it's any secret to anybody knows me that I have a huge affection for New Zealand. When I became editor of Whisky magazine, I tried desperately to find a good whiskey, and there weren't any. And basically, the New Zealand Whisky Company is owned by Greg Ramsey, who's a good friend of mine. I emailed him this morning to tell him I was going to be talking about him. And basically, he's Tasmanian, but he loves New Zealand. He's learning at the moment. He's in the process of learning all about the Dunedin sound, which is all the Flying Nun bands like the Chills and the Clean and the Verlaines and Straight Jacket Fits, Huddlers Chickens. We can go on. This was the New Zealand scene was amazing when I got there in '87, and
wow.
But the whiskey wasn't so great. Anyway, Greg bought up the stock. He's basically put a lot of it back into. He's changed it. He took ordinary whiskey. This one is 70% single malt, and it's 30% a grain whiskey, but all from the same place in Oamaru. So what you've got is basically what John Glazer would call a double-double. It's a blend from one distillery, so it's a single blended whiskey, if you can have such a thing. I love the fact that he's playing with the rules and the names. He also had a problem with Balvenie with the name Doublewood, and he's Australian, so doesn't care less, and we can talk a bit more about that later. I just love the approach of what they're doing. And this is one of my favourite whiskies. I emailed him to say, look, while I was planning this, I'd need to buy a bottle. I don't expect a freebie, but I'd need to buy a bottle because I haven't had it for a long time. But, great. And also they put stills in and they're starting to distill. I'll tell you very, very quickly, there's a couple of problems with New Zealand. One is that basically most of it's Scottish descent, so they look to Scotland for whiskey and not to New Zealand. and there's the prophet in his own country. There's that attitude. Secondly, that it's not totally illegal to distill your own spirits. So a lot of people are making their own whiskey, or a version of what might be a malt spirit. And so it's hard to. And thirdly, there's not enough people in New Zealand to sustain any distillery or any business. So that's why it's probably taken an Australian to do it. But I really wish them well. And I'm a huge fan of what they're trying to do. I see Greg every time he's over. And I've seen him in Tasmania, and I was hoping to be back there in August because I was going to be heading the judging panel for the Tasmanian Whisky Festival. But obviously, that's in August, and they've got locked down, I think, till September. Don't know, because Tasmania is an island, and they're already opening their bars and clubs again. So we'll see. But that's why I chose this one.
Great stuff. I'm sorry, I know I've got the wrong bottle shape there. I know it's the tall one.
That's fine. It's absolutely fine.
But at least it looks like the same whiskey.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us about the track you chose to go along with this whiskey, Dom.
Yeah, very quickly, my favourite band in all the world ever is REM. I could have put 5 albums into my Desert Island discs. I chose a track out of Time. Most people say Automatic is the People's best REM album. I love Green. I love Out of Time. I love New Adventures in Hi-Fi. I love Reveal.
Yeah.
I think that actually, yes, Shining Happy People and Near Wild Heaven are on Out of Time, but Out of Time's got Losing My Religion on it. I nearly chose Half a World Away because this is when I left New Zealand, and New Zealand's half a world away, and it reminds me of when I was there, and it reminds me of what I missed when I was here, and it's just one of their greatest songs. But this song, you could play any bit of it, you either get it or you don't, but this is REM to me at their most fun. I just adore this song.
Okay, well, why don't we listen to 30 seconds of it?
Come to me with the phone in your hand. Come to me with your hair in a tie. Come to me with obsessions. Come to me with excuses. Don't doubt and throw. Wear me out. You wear me out. We've been through.
Not enough, is it?
No, but there you are.
Not enough. But yeah, it's,
do you know, I've really enjoyed the challenge, but I have spent quite a lot of time trying to work this out, because how do you summarize a song in 30 seconds? We've got a worst example coming up later. It's virtually a perfect song, and it really broke my heart to think I had to break it down. If somebody had spoken while I was playing it, I would shout, "Shut up!" You know. But there you are.
Well,
the only thing that keeps me quiet, really.
Well, hopefully, anyone who's watching or listening that likes the songs will go out and buy them, or stream them from their favorite music service. But yeah, REM, I love it. Night Swimming is one of my favorite.
Yeah, fantastic.
Just so haunting, and yeah, I'm big fan. Good stuff. Right, let's just come out of that again. We're back. And okay, so question number 4 to you, Dom, is kind of one of those fanciful questions, but it's always interesting to get every individual's opinion, because obviously everyone has different heroes and different people that they really revere. And so my question to you, as it was to Colin and Sam, is what historical or cultural figure from the past or present would you most like to meet and share a dram with, and why?
Yeah, this is a really tough one. I couldn't go down the historical route because I'm pretty left wing, and well, I'm very left wing, and so all my historical political heroes are, well, let's face it, it's bloody boring. I mean, you know, to be that serious about what you do, you know, I was looking at certain names I've got Malcolm X down. Well, it's not his fault. He's boring because he was Muslim, so he's not going to have a dram with me. So Malcolm X would have been into it. Michael Collins, not sure. Michael Collins was the controversial Irish nationalist at the time of the segregation of Ireland. Fascinating. Eamon de Valera, another one from the same era, but he became he changed his politics, became very low. So it's very, very hard. So I decided not to go down that route. I thought about Elvis Presley because I'm a massive Elvis fan, but again, you know, would he be up for a dram? I don't know. So anyway, I went for someone who I know drinks whiskey, and it's going to surprise absolutely nobody who knows me at all. I chose Richie Blackmore. Richie Blackmore is the guitarist, or was the guitarist of Deep Purple and Rainbow. Yeah. A new copy of Planet Rock came out today, and it's got the top 100 live albums of all time. And number one is Made in Japan by Deep Purple. And it goes on about Richie Blackmore. Richie Blackmore, I've watched him. I've been a huge fan since 1976. And I've seen him any number of times live. He was Mr. Moody. He was Mr. Serious. You know, he used to take some fans for little seances and sit with candles. But most of the time, he wasn't approachable. And then during this lockdown, because his wife, he's 75 now. His wife's 50.
Wow.
Hey, rock and roll, eh? But Candice is a backing singer, and I tweet to her too. She replies to my tweets. And, I'm a big kid with this stuff. I never got, my wife says, you starstruck? Yeah, I am. Candice Knight wrote to me, Anyway, they do this little lock-in. They play kind of baroque music now. They play kind of 16th century Greensleeve stuff. And he plays, old-fashioned instruments. And they've got the Minstrels Hall, and they've all got silly names like Lord Lucan of Law. And it's all like frilly costumes, etc. And he's not doing rock stuff. But at this lock-in, he sits there with his pint of beer. At one point, he went to the toilet during it, and he chats, and he's laughing with his wife, and they're telling stories, and then they play, things like Over the Rainbow, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, or White Cliffs of Dover. Kind of, anyway, I just think, because I know he likes a good whiskey, and I know he likes a beer, and he's now chatty and more fun. He's got old and affable. Yeah, you never should meet your heroes, but now I think that would be it for me.
Yeah, well, that's potentially attainable, isn't it? It's not completely out of the question.
No, I just, I'm going to tell you, I don't like name dropping. But one of the highlights of my career was when I was flown to Sydney to meet Steve Tyler and Joe Perry. And I would absolutely love the album Pump by Aerosmith. Absolutely adore it. It's one of my favourite albums of all time. And there's not a lot going on with those people. They took a lot of heroin. And, I'm not going to be rude about them, but at one point, Steve Tyler sat down and played piano of a new song. And it's the most beautiful melody. And Joe Perry was kind of humming the guitar part. And it was just one of the highlights. And I said, what do you call that? And he said, You Can Lick My Love Pump. That's a spinal tap joke. Yeah. Hey, Jason Standing, if you're listening, way! No, he didn't say that. But just if Richie Blackmore was to pick up a guitar and say, we're looking at songs from the new album, have you heard this one? And he played a few notes, that would be me. That would be me.
Yeah. Sounds good to me. Okay, tell us about your fourth dram.
So here, this is a really straightforward one. I just at this point, it's an Irish whiskey. It's my favourite Irish whiskey. This would be in my top 3 drams of all time too, with Talisker 18, and it's Redbreast 12-year-old cask strength. What can you say? There's no need for me really. Everybody who knows it, and if you don't, you should. I just think this is the whole history of distillation secrets and uniqueness of Irish whiskey in one bottle. And I just want to dedicate this to a guy called John Burke. He's the publisher and owner of Cask Magazine in Ireland, and to his wife Lisa, who's been fighting a really violent form of cancer. And I keep in touch with him. I speak to him twice a week. We haven't been able to publish the magazine. Hopefully that's going to change, and hopefully it will come back online if nothing else. He's got superb camera stuff. We should be doing stuff like you are. But he's concerned. He's spending an awful lot of time in hospital in Dublin, and obviously with coronavirus, that's not funny.
No.
So I dedicate this whiskey to him. I know that next time I see him, this will be the first dram he's paying.
It sounds like a plan. And okay, and tell us about the your song choice, please, Dom.
Yeah, again, this is a band I've known for years and years and years. This is the Waterboys. I once flew back from a Speyside Whisky Festival from Aberdeen, and checking in next to me, that's him at the front, that's Mike Scott. He's actually Scottish, but he's got a huge Gaelic heart. And he was checking in with his guitar next to me, and our flight was delayed. We were in Inverness, we weren't in Aberdeen, we were in Inverness. And our flight was delayed by 3 or 4 hours, and I sat close to him but I didn't want to talk to him. And eventually we got back to London, and I went up to him and I just said, Mr. Scott, and he looked up at me and I said, you have written some of the songs that are the soundtrack to my life, and thank you very much. It was great. But I also interviewed him once, and I had a pen and paper, and I was on the phone and I was asking questions, and he just says yes or no to everything. And if you're a journalist and you haven't written down the questions, then yes and no doesn't mean anything at the end. It was the worst interview I ever did. But that's only because he's shy. Anyway, I could recommend 4 albums. This is the Sea with the Hole of the Moon on it. It's a great album. Fisherman's Blues, great album. But I've chosen this one because I think any West Coast whiskey fan should own Room to Roam. It's basically him going back to Ireland and writing Gaelic songs. And I've picked the most beautiful song. This is the song that nobody should ever cut it down to 30 seconds. But I urge everybody, if they don't know this song, to go and listen to it in its entirety, because every single note on it is perfect. The guitar, the saxophone player, Thistlethwaite, at the time, the band was just off the planet. So this is my favourite. I nearly put there's another one called A Man Is in Love, which I love, but it's a bit sickly. So I've gone for this instead.
Okay, well, let's listen to our prescribed 30 seconds.
Long as stars are above you, longer by my
Took us over about 32 seconds there. I hope it doesn't get us into trouble. You never know.
No, you don't.
Okay, I'm going to turn off my virtual background. The reason I've got this up is that, well, you'll see in a sec, not because anything nefarious is going on, but basically sunshine blares through this window and it glares the screen. So I can turn it off now, though. Here we go. So that's what I really look like. I think people were complaining about the funny shape of my head. No, it doesn't look like my head's conical shaped. Good stuff. Okay, well, that was great. Thanks, Dom. So just moving on to the last question of the evening, last official question of the evening. I mean, you've been at the spearhead of so many movements, and I certainly think that in many cases you're almost ahead of your time, in that some of the things you're championing in the past anyway were perhaps not quite ready for themselves to be championed. They weren't quite ready to get behind you and really go for it, which is to your credit. You clearly have an eye for developments in the whiskey world and world whiskies, particularly. And so I'm quite interested to hear your answer to the next question, which is simply, where do you see whiskey going in the future? In the short, medium, and long term. Is there anywhere we should be looking at and towards in terms of quality whiskey and innovation?
Yeah, well, the answer is yes. I think I thought about this a lot because Actually, I mean, there are regions. I mean, I'm really interested in what's happening in the Alpine region. The backgrounds of the countries, some of the whiskies in Austria, southern Germany, Switzerland, you could argue North Italy, and Liechtenstein, is that some of the whiskies have huge budgets because they're made by fruit juice manufacturers like Fana. You know, you go on holiday in Spain, the chances are your fruit juice you buy, you know, for your tent or whatever you're staying in, will be a Fana whiskey. A Fana fruit juice. So when they built a micro distillery, they were not short of cash. So you get the basis of a micro distillery and the skills of a very expensive distiller to be brought in, and beautiful packaging and all the rest of it. But it still has a small thing because it's not known. And there's a lot of 4-year-old, 3, 4, 5-year-old whiskies. I was due to speak to Arthur Nagler, who's a very good friend of mine. You'll know him from your judging things, I would think. We're working on various things to do with bringing Germanic-speaking countries into the UK, because one of their problems is they just don't have the language abilities to do it. So thankfully, I'm fluent in German, not. And my German comes down to Danke. It's a bit embarrassing because my code word on my computer for all my Germanic countries is Brexit 19. They think it's hilarious to walk into a meeting and then slam the door in my face and say, "You're not welcome." But anyway, that's by the by. But the two things I'm going to mention very quickly that I think are really interesting on a much more broad scale. One is the invention of new drinks that are malt-based but cannot call themselves whiskey. I'll give you a classic example. It happens with Compass Box a few years ago with Orangery. He could call it whiskey infused with orange peel, but not orange peel infused whiskey, because whiskey cannot exist if it's got orange peel in it. It can't. Yeah. And it's the same with Angel's Envy in Louisville. And in Louisville, they make a bourbon finished in a port cask. Well, by definition, it's no longer a bourbon. But is it a nice drink? Yeah, it bloody is. It's a great drink. So there needs to be, and people think I'm very anal about this, but I think it's really important that we maintain the standards that, you know, there's nothing wrong with what Scotch whisky offers. In fact, on the contrary, it's really, really healthy the way it defines itself. But we should therefore separate these new drinks from whisky in that sense, but encourage them to find new categories for themselves. And it's happening all over America at the moment. I thought a few years ago when I saw a Las Vegas made champagne, I thought, nah, I don't think so. And they're doing it all the time. They're calling things whiskey that clearly aren't. You know, a lot of craft brewers are distilling craft beer with hops in it. It's not whiskey, but it's interesting. American single malt whiskey is really interesting. And where it differs to Scotland is that it's matured in virgin oak American cask, or white oak. It doesn't have to be American. White oak virgin cask, like bourbon would be, but it's got a malt product in so it's different. There are distilleries like Westwood in Portland. I was fortunate enough to go there last year. And what they're doing is high quality. So that's one trend. I think it's really interesting. There's another, I could name it, any number of distilleries very quickly. So in Louisville, I love Louisville. Copper and Kings, run by a South African Leeds United fan, is crazy. But he's making mainly brandy, but he's doing brandy finished in all sorts of whiskey casks from independent micro distillers in America. But he's also doing whiskies in brandy casks, and he's playing with flavors, and they're just throwing it about. But it's different to what's happening elsewhere. So that's definitely well worth watching what's going on there, without doubt. Yeah. And then the other thing I think's will become a trend is that we're going to see that countries realizing that actually, when I wrote my book Whisky America, I didn't realize that the Minnesota Vikings are called the Minnesota Vikings because they're full of Scandinavians who came across the top of the world and settled in the north of America. And that these are European, Scandinavian-based people. And then you take what's happening in Santa Fe, where they use twigs from the desert to dry their barley, because they've got all this Mexican, desert border stuff. These are totally different people. These are different drying methods to dry their barley. So peat's interesting in its own right. I mean, if you think the difference between Islay and Speyside, imagine the difference between Islay and Tasmania, because it's the flora and fauna that's local. So I think we'll see a lot more of that sort of thing. And we're already seeing it with the Scandinavian countries. So I reckon the big boys won't try and do it themselves. They'll do what Diageo are already doing, which is with Distill, they're going to give money to Stauning to do Stauning whiskey the Danish way. And Stauning whiskey is an acquired taste, but it's made with Danish peats. They use smoking methods that are natural to the Danish palate, same as Sweden, the junipers and all the rest of it. And Diageo and those companies, I think, will invest in those people to do it themselves and guide them. And we're seeing it with Distill. Westwood, I think, has some form of international ownership. There are any number. So I think that will be the way we'll develop new flavors, etc. And I think the big boys will be happy to concentrate on what they can mass produce, which isn't necessarily single malt, but they'll be happy to have an ownership or a right to look at what's happening coming out of some of those countries. Yeah.
Well, I know obviously Australia is very close to your heart. I don't want to give too much away, but obviously your next choice might have something to do with it. And I know, when I was reading up for and studying and all that kind of stuff for my book, I was totally blown away with how much, what's going on in Australia, not just in Tasmania, but on the mainland. Sheer number of craft or micro distillers, whatever you want to call them, across that land. So why don't we segue nicely into talking about Australian whiskey and your next dram, which may or may not be an Australian whiskey.
Yeah, it is. This is Heartwood, and this is a Tasmanian distiller, Tim Duckett. What I love about the Australians is that while the Swedes shows total respect and they want to recreate everything that the Scots do in a perfect way, and they do it better, or at least they can produce something as good or better. Don't get me wrong, if I write a book 2/3 of it's Scotland, this is not a downer on Scotland anyway. But the fascinating side for me, at the front line place where you say you think I am, this is where it is. The Swedes do it very, very kind of, let's get a barley strain from the 60s. The Australians basically say, we're Australian, we'll do it our way. There's a statue, I'm going to knock it over. Why should I do that? This all started many years ago when I worked for Whisky magazine, and we used to put all of our whiskies that weren't in the traditional areas into a category called rest of the world. The Australians drove them mad. Two things drove the Australians mad. One, why would I want to be compared to something from India and Taiwan? I'm Australian. It's just a catch-all. And two, it makes us feel second division because there are all the big boys and there's the rest of the world. And secondly, they really didn't get age statements because they started talking about climate, heat, barrel size. They used to say, how do you know anything's only 12-year-old is a good Scotch if you don't know what cask it's in, the size of the cask, what it's used for? Australia struggled to get a lot of good sherry, so they used a lot of home ports, but they have a port industry going back 100 years. So we're not talking about shoddy, but they were basically just not battering down barriers and just saying, look, listen, we don't have to be Scotland. We're in the other side of the world. And in fact, why would we try and compete with an island on the other side of the world when we've got the whole Southeast Asia to worry about down here and the whole country called Australia here? So Tim Duckett is one of my favourite people because he just very rock and roll. He basically, I've compared his whiskies before now. Like if you remember, or any Australian steamer, if you think of Stark at the moment, some of these Australian bowlers, they try and knock the English bowler's batsman's head off. That's how they make their whiskies. They make these whiskies that are not meant to be like Scotch. They're meant to be bang. If you can't take it, bounce out. We're going to bounce you out with it. And so Tim does this. He's also friends. He has a bizarre friendship with Brian Ritchie from the Violent Femmes, who were a real cult band back in the day and still exist, and basically sort of do a kind of a college form of free-form jazz art, I suppose. But Brian lives down in Tasmania as well, and they met on a beach, and their pleasure is drinking Heartwood whiskey and smoking cigars on the beach and sticking two fingers up to the world. And he comes up with whiskey titles like this one, Convict Redemption, but Unleash the Beast. You know, this everything he does just makes me smile. And look at the strength of this. It's 72.5%. But it's not young whiskey. By Scottish standards, it's not young whiskey. He was getting casks of Lark and Sullivan's Cove 12, 14 years ago when I first started writing about Australian whiskey. Well, around that time. He was laying stuff down, and he's got casks that have now, you know, considerably aged. And in Australia, because of the climate and because of, you know, everything that's different, you can't compare. So this is the most extreme example, and everything he bottles, you know, you'll know this. Something turns up in the post, and sometimes you open it and your heart sinks or it raises. We all do it. And if I get anything from Heartwood, I'm in second heaven. He's won any number of awards for me. I'll declare an interest. He supported my Wizards of Whiskey, but that's what they were aimed at. They were always aimed at people like Tim. So that's why I've chosen this particular one, because it's still available. But he's also promised me this morning, because I wake up to emails, you know, 6:37. I have my overnight emails from Australia, and he promised to send me a sample of his latest release, which I can't remember. But if you look it up on his website, he'll tell you. It's going to be another stormer. He's now got his son involved with the business, and he's also doing some 46% whiskies for the faint-hearted. Fantastic. Great story all the way in. Crazy guy, great mate. Stories I could tell about getting... no, that doesn't matter. I'm not going there. Anyway, Tim, if you're watching this, because he was hoping to get up or to record or find this, etc. But if he's watching, I tell you, he's well worth trying to get on this program.
Yeah, well, I mean, if he can't watch it live, you can tell him that it is available on, or will be available on our Facebook page for.
That's what I thought, because that's how I found the rest of the Colin Dunn one. So I told him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so you know, our hope is to build up a nice library of good folks like yourself, and we can watch them, you know, when we're locked down again. Hope not. Anyway, tell us about the song choice to go with the 72.5% Convict Redemption. Yeah,
I'm not sure where you go with that. I wasn't going to go for something serious by the Bad Seeds or the Birthday Party or anything like that. Now I've gone for another one of my favourite bands. This band should never have remained an Aussie cult thing. This particular album, The Tracks Off, was released just before I emigrated, and it was the big label release, and I don't know why it didn't happen. But I've chosen it's the Hoodoo Gurus. They're from Sydney. They're Australia's funny because it's known for its heavy rock, and it's known for its, you know, being AC/DC and Jimmy Barnes and the Angels and all that stuff. But it actually has a very sensitive musical side. It has the Fly None thing from New Zealand, along with people like Paul Kelly, the Triffids, the Go-Betweens. And then there's a sort of a kind of a trashy sort of psychedelic-y thing. And this is where the Hoodoo Gurus fit in. This is a pub band, basically, but I got to know the singer quite well when I was in New Zealand, and this is another go-to. The first two albums are just psychedelic track. The track I picked, though, I picked it not because it's my favourite, but because today, with the way we are in our world, this song is not a bad anthem to have. So it's called Good Times, and it's by the Hoodoo Gurus.
Okay, well, let me just check I've got it queued up before I say go. Okay, so this is Hoodoo Gurus and Good Time, or Good Times. Yeah, that seems like a nice one to finish on, Dom.
Yeah.
Very, very appropriate. We just, I've got I've pulled up a few images earlier on. For some reason I can't find any that I've taken of you in the past, but maybe that's because we haven't seen each other for so long. But I found some that I thought might be of interest. Who's this young fella?
Oh dear.
Tell me where you are, what you're doing there.
So I became incredibly unpopular in New Zealand as a music critic because I came over. I love flying and I loved all that stuff, but the stuff I covered in the country was British and European stuff for the New Zealand Herald. That's my job. We had a very good Graham, my co-writer, covered local music, and they invented an expression called to Roskrow, which meant to miss the support band, because it was a New Zealand habit that if you wrote 9 paragraphs on a band like U2, you put 1 paragraph at the end saying the local band supported. My attitude wasn't that they should get 1 paragraph tokenism. I should go and see them and give them a 10-paragraph review of themselves. So they chose to define to Roskrow as to miss the support band, and I defined it as to see the support band but not to bother writing about them, because I could write about them in their own right. And I followed a guy called Colin Hogg, who is this legendary rock god in New Zealand. And a lot of people took issue with me being British and changing the rules and not doing it the way it should be done. But I actually reviewed a lot more local bands in their own right than Colin ever did. And this was the interview with a magazine, I can't remember what it was called, but when I decided to go back to England, so this is 1991, I returned to England, they decided to, who the hell does Roskrow think he is interview? And I was interviewed. I'm very proud of the fact there's a band called SBUD, and they wrote a song called DR Mother Effer. And I sent a letter threatening to sue them because my mother was 26,000 miles away and they didn't see the joke. Anyway, that was the pitch that was used on the article. That was me in 1991.
Here's another.
Yeah, that was in my serious phase. Yeah, I was led astray by one Mr. Broom.
Yeah,
and,
yes.
Yeah, and
That's brilliant.
yeah. Actually, Dave wasn't much. Oh, now this is a great story. I went down to see. This isn't long ago. I went down to see Doug McIver, and Doug and I before the lockdown. Doug and I, every month or so, if I was doing London meetings, I would always end at the Red Lion. Anybody who knows Doug will know the Red Lion. Or one of those pubs round the corner, and drink with him. And we're in the pub. This is. It could even be this year. And we're in the pub, and he goes, "Have you seen who's in the corner?" And I looked across, and I said, "It's Ronnie Cox." And he goes, "No, look again." So it just happened. I got my season ticket in my pocket. So I said, I went across there. I'd had a few drinks. I said, "Mr. Lineker, I'm really sorry to interrupt," because he was with some friends. He just wandered into the Red Lion. I said, "But look," and he looked at it, he goes, "It's a season ticket." Leicester. I said, "I know." I said, "I'm not going to disturb you now because you're with friends, but I just want to say, fantastic, that what you're doing for Leicester and all the rest." Anyway, before I left the pub, he was still there. So I went across and I said, "Do you mind if I have my picture taken?" And I stood next to him and I said, and I used to go to, he debuted in the same team as a guy called Dave Buchanan and another guy called Andy Peake. And Andy Peake went to Market Harbour School and he was mates with all my mates. And he used to come and drink with us on Thursday night. I never went to school with him and I only knew him through my friends, but I knew him. And then one day came in and he had a Coke and he said, "I'm having a Coke because I'm in the squad for Saturday." And we laughed because it's only 17. Anyway, he debuted with Gary Lineker. So I said to Gary Lineker, "Do you remember Andy Peake?" And he looked at me and goes, "Remember him? I was his best man." Anyway, that was the photo I had taken with Gary Lineker.
Brilliant.
Just purely by chance in the Red Lion.
And I thought we couldn't go without giving a wee plug for one of your books there. I think Whisky Japan's one of your most recent, is it not?
Well, actually, it's not my most recent one, but I
Is it
would
not?
say I feel a bit of a con man here. I'm going to be honest. I wrote this as an ignorant person looking in, but Dave Broom, Stefan Van Aken are both have. I contacted Stefan Van Aken because if you read the book, I have a section where I get the people who were there at the time giving their story. And I did it like a journalist would. I did it, I don't know this topic, zero to hero. How did it happen? And I asked the players involved. Stefan said, "You'll never write that book." That's what he said to me. He said, "I spent 4 years. I know Japanese. I know the distillers. They don't trust journalists. I've been around all the series. I haven't done any of that." So I wrote the book as an outsider looking in. And so I'm only too happy to say that this is an introductory book. This is the Liam Gallagher Oasis trashy track of the Japanese whiskey industry. But hopefully it will lead you to the Dave Broom book, which is phenomenal, and the Stefan Van Aken book, because they are far better books than this. But that doesn't mean that doesn't have a value, because it's like a traveler's guide. It's a real entry-level book. And it's meant to set the passion. And the trouble with Japanese whiskey is that a lot of it now it's very hard to, like Colin chose bottles, but very hard because so much of it isn't available. And that could easily become a no, look what I tasted that you can't. And I didn't want that. So thank you for basically telling your readers, your listeners and viewers to go and get somebody else's book.
Yeah. Well, that's very gracious of you, as always. Well, I think that's been great, Dom. I really enjoyed having you on. I hope you've enjoyed it too.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Obviously, I'm going to send you off on a desert island with obviously your mentor, Michael Jackson's Malt Whiskey Companion, which was my kind of go-to when I was first reading about whiskey. And what a great guy he was too. So we're going to give you that. And on luxury, what luxury would you take with you to the desert island?
Yeah, I thought about this long and hard. I think I'd take an extensive language course, something that you could start from zero and end up fluent, so that I had something to do over a period of time. I do French every day. I have done for years. I still can't speak it, but I do a French lesson at the moment I'm doing nearly an hour a day in French. I just adore everything about France and the French language. And so I do that, but I'd like to try and do another one. And I thought about which one, and I thought Spanish, because it's very close to Latin, and I studied Latin. I think I find it easy, but I decided it would be between Irish Gaelic and Maori, and I think I'd go for Maori because I think it suits the idea of living on an island. I think there's something I have tattoos with Maori words in, and I use, as all white New Zealanders do, they use certain expressions. When my mother died, my friend who I'm speaking to tomorrow, this is what we talk about. I haven't spoken to him for 10 years, and he just said one word to me when my mother died, and it was Aroa Nui, which means big love, complete love. Aroa Nui, and I want to have that tattooed next. And I think because those words have no equivalent in the English language, I'd quite like to learn Maori. So I take a Maori course.
Sounds good to me. It might take you a while.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, well, listen, Dom, it's been an absolute pleasure. I hope you've enjoyed it.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thanks very, very much.
And if nothing else, if nobody was watching, but we know somebody was watching, at least Ian Logan was watching. It's been great to reconnect, and let's not leave it here. But for now, Dom, I'm going to consign you to your desert island. But I'll pick you up from there when we're out of lockdown, and we'll go for it.
That would be great. Really nice to catch up with you and Amanda. And love to your family. And I hope Amanda's coping with lockdown, because it's obviously tough for her. So, love to see you when it's all over.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. I'm just going to play us out on the proper music. Dom Roskrow, thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.